Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Oh, here comes a bus.
All right. Well, welcome to the Skeptic Zone. We're currently in the middle of Sydney, driving around, and in the skeptical mobile is the man himself. I've got to keep my hands away from the buttons here because I'm actually holding Richard's 26-inch CRT television,
yes,
which he records all his shows on. Amazing. He hasn't even gone to a flat screen yet. Now, we are currently in the middle of Sydney, in Glebe. Amazing place. It gets much better when Richard goes away, because when Richard goes overseas, they bring out all the good stuff. They hide the good stuff when you're here, Richard.
Yeah, I believe you're right, Maynard, but what a nice day it is today. And we're here to talk about what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. Well, I'm going to kick off with a story about tsunamis hitting Australia, Maynard. Did you know that all the major capital cities in Australia have been wiped out by tsunamis?
Get out.
Yeah.
They've done a really good job rebuilding, and I didn't notice.
You'd never know. Anyway, what do psychics and other predictors have to say about tsunamis hitting Australia? And then we interview Andy Wilson from Liverpool, who's going to tell us all about the upcoming QED, Question, Explore, Discover in Manchester. And I wish I could go.
That's going to be huge. Have you ever been to one of them?
I've been to two.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of talking around the bar late at night.
Well, that's the point, I think, Maynard. That's the point. Lots of something around the bar late at night. And then it's You Can Count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill. And Adrienne had a string of skeptical visitors to Calgary in the last couple of weeks.
Your cats.
Apart from my cats, who went on a quick holiday to Canada, Adrienne talks to Craig and Susan Shearer from New Zealand, the New Zealand Skeptics. She also talks to Faith and Rodriguez, some skeptical friends from the United States. And finally, our good friend Andras Pinter from the ESP Podcast dropped into Canada and caught up with Adrienne.
Well, obviously, Canada's the place to be, really. What are you doing here, Richard?
Well, next week I am flying to North America. I won't be visiting Canada this time, but I will be visiting the Bay Area, San Francisco, and then I'll be visiting Brian Dunning.
Well, of course, Richard will be representing the Australian government in America while he's there. He's our ambassador. We're just sending him there. So see if you can do a trade deal. Except don't do a trade deal with Dunning. He just sent us a whole bunch of wood.
He'll send us his Sasquatch.
Yes. Look, and Dunning is obsessed with Death Valley. What's the go with that?
Dunning, I went to Death Valley, a decade ago with Brian Dunning.
Hang on, I've realised that now. We're going the wrong way here now because we've been talking here. This is, we need to go through the other way. Remember we went the way before and it was really easy to go into town? You go into town this way, we'll get stuck in traffic.
We're going to get stuck in traffic. We'll just have to carry on.
Okay.
Anyway, Brian Dunning loves Death Valley. I went there with him over a decade ago and it was one of the best trips of my life, apart from the time he left me in a bar and then sort of disappeared. But, that's Brian Dunning.
Look, he's been known to do that a few times in his life. And when you're going through the Trove and looking at all these things you do each week, what's been the weirdest thing where you thought, there won't be much about this, and there was heaps in the archives?
Everything. You know what? You look, you think there won't be much about this, but if you go back over the decades, you'll find, it's amazing what you'll dig up. And this week I was digging around and I found lots of references to the end of the world. That's coming up this week.
Right. So it's just like the Book of Revelation, not Revelations. I think it's the Book of Revelation, isn't it?
Revelation, singular, yeah.
Singular, yeah. And the revelation is that you're getting the hell out of this place and going to America.
That's quite.
Hey, everybody, keep it. Wait till he leaves. Wait till the wheels come off the ground. Then bring out the good stuff, everybody.
And we're stopped at a pedestrian crossing. Look at that. Look, people going about their business.
Yeah, look, Newtown and Glebe is a really nice place on a Saturday morning to be hanging out and doing stuff.
Oh, the Glebe markets are on. Look at that. They're back. I thought they went away, but
I thought they went away too.
Yeah.
Look, there's always people trying to still second-hand stuff, a bit of the old guff. There's always stuff like that to be sold, Richard. But look, enjoy the show. And if you do see Richard on the in the North American continent, just don't tell him that we've got all the good stuff out at home.
What?
The good china, the good glasses, the good scissors, all of these things come out
scissors.
Once you're gone. This stuff comes out, yeah. You wonder why the scissors are no good, because they don't put the good ones out until you leave.
It all makes sense now. Well, look, I think it's time that you and I head into town. We might find a bit of halloumi?
That's right.
Halloumi.
A bit of halloumi. And I would like to be recommended for a Occam's Razor Award, but unfortunately I can't, as I haven't done anything skeptical. Although I once booed an Inner West real estate agent in Sydney. Is that counted as skeptical work? I booed them, Richard.
You should get the gold award for that.
Thank you. Boo! Your rent's too high.
Well, while we do all that, we hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. The next wave. Richard Saunders casts an eye to the horizon in search of predicted tsunamis. He's still waiting. And this comes from the pages of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics, volume 42, number 4, from December 2022. Doom and gloom have always been good news for those wishing to gain publicity or notoriety. After all, if the news is all is well tomorrow and nothing very bad is going to happen, then not many people will pay much attention. If, however, someone has news, maybe gained by clairvoyance, that the very city you live in will soon be swept away with much destruction and death, then many, maybe not readers of this journal, may sit up and take notice. Certain sections of the media certainly will, and history tells us this is just the case. Tsunamis are nothing new to the Australian continent. If we take the long view of history, we discover that many giant waves have crashed into our land, as the evidence carved into the rocks and the fossil record shows. But these events are not unique to Australia. All coastal areas on Earth can reveal a similar story. But that is just the nature of our planet, with its moving tectonic plates creating earthquakes and mass slippages under the ocean, and the very rare asteroid impact. Australian cities doomed. On page 1 of issue 1 of this very journal, from 1981, comes the report headed, "Perth is still there." In January of that year, a certain clairvoyant named Joseph Gaiape, and I apologise if that's not pronounced correctly, predicted that a giant wall of water 17 metres high, that's about 55 feet, would wash Perth away on the morning of February the 9th. The report goes on to say that Peter Gregson, a scientist from the Perth Geophysical Observatory, issued a statement to allay public fears. Public fears? From a prediction made by a clairvoyant? Yes, sadly, this does happen, as we'll see again. Needless to say, Perth survived the day intact. Only 5 years earlier, another Australian city was awaiting a watery fate. In January 1976, Adelaide was on notice that on the 19th of that month, an earthquake and resulting tidal wave would put an end to, as one newspaper reporter wrote at the time, the Athens of the South. A certain John Nash, a one-time house painter, claimed that doom would befall the city between 10:30 a.m. and midday. He was so convinced by his own vision, he sold his house and moved to another state before disaster could strike. But what made him so sure? Some reports comment on the religious view of Nash, as it seems the recent relaxation of laws in South Australia regarding homosexuality could have rubbed him up the wrong way. Maybe God would put an end to the wicked ways of Adelaide and wash away the sin. This reasoning struck a chord with various ethnic groups in the city, described in reports of being of Mediterranean origin, and many took to the hills, literally. With some people in a panic, religious leaders issued statements to try and quell the fears. This story was picked up and reported around the world, with many newspapers in the USA carrying the prediction. While most in Adelaide took it with a large pinch of salt, and even an exercise to have a bit of fun, people turning up to work in flippers and goggles, for example, many were truly scared and moved out of the city, at least for the day in question. The Premier at the time, Don Dunstan, promised to appear on Glenelg Beach on the 19th to show there was no need to panic. He did so, received favourable press, and soon after the city went back to normal. A failed prophecy makes for very stale news indeed. It seems that God Almighty was not too fussed about the goings-on in Adelaide in 1976. But what about the den of vice and immorality that is the city of Sydney? In mid-2018, committee member Ian Bryce and I came across a man outside the Sydney Town Hall, dressed in a bright yellow safety vest and armed with a microphone and loudspeaker, warning of an impending day of reckoning. The large professional printed sign next to him read, "Warning! Tsunami to hit Sydney 20th September 2018. Impact at 9 p.m. 400,000 lives lost. Everyone that calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Jesus is Lord." Attempts to chat with this lone evangelist met with little success, so we have no real idea why Sydney was in the firing line. However, in the coming weeks I noticed others from his sect/cult were also in the streets around the centre of the city with similar signs. A press release or flyer from the group, found in many letterboxes in Sydney in the months leading up to the 20th of September, predicted an estimated 400,000 deaths, as well as the destruction of many landmarks like the Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge, with the following earthquake finishing off inner suburbs such as Newtown. Yes, in this case, God sends a tsunami and then an earthquake. Talk about moving in mysterious ways. We can only wonder what then went through the minds of the believers on the morning of the 21st of September, when Sydney somehow survived with calm weather and clear skies. But wait, there's more. So far we have seen how Perth, Adelaide and Sydney dodged disaster. But they were not the only cities to be on a supernatural tsunami watch over the years. In 2010, Prophet David Dewar from Kenya visited the Gold Coast and warned a small congregation that a tsunami was going to hit the east coast of Australia on the 4th of September of that year. This wave would also impact Hawaii, Japan, the Philippines and New Zealand, as well as the west coast of the USA. No small event. Why is it that a tsunami seems to be the instrument of choice when it comes to prophecies of doom for Australia? We could reason that since most of our capital cities are coastal, it would make sense for a god to send a wave to mete out his or her judgment. It also has the advantage, like an earthquake, of being something we can envisage. It is dramatic, on a large scale, and full of destruction. It is something we have all seen with horror on the TV news when we remember the images from Boxing Day 2004 and Japan in 2011. We know these events are capable of smashing cities and killing thousands. It is then a logical choice for putting the fear of God into people, and something the media can easily report. So we wait for the next time God decides to send a wall of water our way and hope that we don't see a repeat of the Adelaide Panic of 1976. People were scared for their lives and the lives of their families. Hopefully, our reporting on the failure of tsunami prophecies over the years will outweigh the worry of a watery fate. About the author. Richard Saunders is a life member of Australian Skeptics and producer and presenter of the Skeptic Zone. And that was The Next Wave. Richard Saunders casts an eye to the horizon in search of predicted tsunamis. He's still waiting. And that comes from the pages of the Skeptic Magazine, Volume 42, Number 4, from December 2022, and that issue will be available for free to download in about 6 months' time.
Hello, Skeptic Zone listeners. This is Susan Gerbic from the GSOW Wikipedia Project. I also explore the world of psychic mediums, grief vampires, and expose their tricks and methods to exploit people. If you'd like to join me on this journey, please subscribe to my channel on YouTube, Psychics Explained. Or if you need help remembering that name, it's also Psychic Sex Planed. I think I'll get a lot more viewers that way. But please join the conversation and subscribe.
Now, folks, one of the wonderful times I remember over the last decades of being a skeptic and roving around the world are the 2 times, I think it's only 2 times, I went to Manchester to take part in QED, Question, Explore, Discover. And I really wish I could go back, not this year, maybe next year, but to tell me all about what people can expect at QED this year, I have on the line from lovely Liverpool, it's Andy Wilson. Hello, Andy.
All right, La.
Good to see you back.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
We were just joking before about various Liverpudlian accents and things like that. I'm doing very well. It's good to see you. Haven't seen you for a long time.
Great stuff. Thank you. It's true.
And what is also true is the wonderful time I had at QED, Question, Explore, Discover, which is...
Oh, fantastic.
It's wrong to say it's Britain's answer to TAM, or it's Britain's answer to Psychon. It's not. It's really its own thing. It sort of almost operates in a different sense, but you get the good names, you get a wide variety of topics, and I loved it. I really loved it.
I mean, years and years ago when we first started out, Richard, the inspiration came from going to conferences like TAM and others, and realising that it was incredibly expensive to go to these things.
Yes.
Once you start adding the extra tickets in and so on. So we wanted to do 2 things. We wanted to build something which we would want to go to ourselves, but also which was a non-profit, so that the costing was kept as low as possible. And that's what we've been doing since 2011. It's
a great philosophy. Since 2011. My, how the years slip by. That's quite amazing. And tell me, where is it? Is it in the same place again this year?
Yeah, we're at the Mercure Hotel in Piccadilly in Manchester. We've got a long-standing relationship with the hotel. And it's great. It's one of the great things about the venue is that we have all of the talks. We've got four tracks this year, and all of the tracks happen inside the actual hotel. And on the 3rd floor, there's a bar. So there's always choices about what to do next. And even if one of those 4 doesn't entertain your imagination, you can always just go to the bar. And so there's one of the things that we love about it is the atmosphere at QED. And, I just love wandering into the bar during the event and just seeing what's going on, and people are playing games and just sat chatting and stuff. It's fantastic. So there's the speakers, but it's quite a social aspect as well.
It does remind me of a little bit of one of the things I remember most about the amazing meetings in Las Vegas at the South Point Hotel and Casino. There was a bar. It was downstairs. It was called the Del Mar, and it was simply the place to meet and hang out and to talk about the day's events and sing songs and do all sorts of things. Now, obviously, you can see the importance of the social side of any of these meetings.
Yeah, a lot of people started coming to QED just because of the reputation of a couple of podcasts many years ago. But I think the reason that they come back is because they've made good, there's kind of a community behind it. They've made good relationships with people and they enjoy coming back. It's a really inclusive space. So even if you're a first timer coming on your own and you're a little bit socially awkward, you're still going to find a home at QED. And, you know, the people who come to QED, they're very, very welcoming. We love to see everybody there.
Is exactly my experience when I was there. It was really a wonderfully happy experience. And the talks, my goodness me, that was the first time I saw, and I met, in fact, Paul Zenon, the wonderful magician mentalist. And not only did he give a talk, if my memory serves, but he also was the entertainment for an evening event. And he had us just in stitches.
Yeah.
He was amazing.
He's a very, very funny guy, Paul. I've got a lot of time and a lot of respect for Paul. He actually came back last year and did an act for us on the Saturday night again. So we have 2 days of talks on the Saturday and the Sunday across these 4 tracks. But on the Saturday night, we have what we bill as the biggest skeptic party of the year. And we have a full programme of entertainment. We start off with the Ockham Awards, which is the UK Skeptic Magazine's annual awards for competence and also incompetence in science, because they also present the Rusty Razor. So we have the Ockhams, and then we've got a bill of comedians on the Saturday. Let me just tell you who the comedians are. We've got Ahir Shah, Helen Arney, who's really, really well known certainly in the UK skeptic scene. She plays the ukulele and does science songs.
All right.
And Sean Doxey. So it's a really strong comedy lineup on Saturday night this year. I'm very excited about it.
It's keeping in tradition, that good old British tradition of great comedians at events like this, isn't it? Especially when you're up north.
Yeah, absolutely. Up north.
Up north.
And you've picked up all the lingo. And
now let's have a look at some of the speakers people can expect to see when they come.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't talk about all of them, but if people go to qedcon.org, everything that we've announced so far will be on there. But I just want to highlight sort of 3 speakers who I'm personally looking forward to.
Yep.
One of them is Professor Jason Arday, and he's a sociologist and writer, probably best known for his research on race and racism. He's the youngest black person ever appointed to a professorship at Cambridge at the age of 37, and he looks like a really interesting guy. He was diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder when he was 3 years old.
Good heavens.
He couldn't speak until he was 11. He couldn't read or write until he was 18. And so he was neurodivergent and black, and he's a success story, but he knows what that journey entails. And I'm really, really interested in hearing that sort of first-person insight from him. Something else that's funny about him is when he was doing his PhD at 27 years old, he wrote a bunch of personal goals on the wall, and one of them was, I will work at Cambridge or Oxford. I think he's going to be fascinating. We've also got Dan Friesen. I don't know if you've heard of Dan, but fans of the Knowledge Fight podcast will be familiar. It's a comedy podcast that explores the far-right movement in America in general, but they focus on the work, if that's the right word, of the conspiracy theorist-in-chief Alex Jones.
Oh, good heavens.
So they use clips of his show to break down what's going on, but also as a sort of launching pad to expose the literally soft white underbelly of that movement.
Interesting, yes.
He's a really, really knowledgeable and interesting guy. I'm really looking forward to him. I think his talk's going to be fantastic. Lucy Cook is a zoologist, and she's recently written a book. I mean, she's really quite well known in the UK for her nature and science presentation on TV. But she's written a book called Bitch, What Does It Mean to Be Female? And she's exploring in that book how female animals have been misunderstood by the scientific patriarchy. And I'm all for smashing the patriarchy, Richard. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's just 3 highlights. There are, I think we have a total of 12 main stage speakers over the weekend.
Right.
We've got the breakout room, we've got the podcast room, we've got the panels room. There's always something going on at QED.
You got the podcasters, you got the panels, and you got the pub. What more could people possibly want? It sounds too good to be true. I don't know.
We're doing our best here, man. We're doing our best.
It does sound too good to be true, but it is true. Folks, it is true.
We've got a special MC this year, Richard.
Oh.
I say special because she's Australian. Mm-hmm. She's called Beck Hill.
Okay.
And she's going to be holding it all together. Yeah.
I can trust that an Australian can hold it all together. I barely held it all together, folks, and I was there simply because I was having such a wonderful time. Sincerely, it is simply one of the best meetings of skeptical and scientific brains on the planet, and you can be there. Head to Manchester this September, folks, on the 23rd and 24th, and you can find out more, of course, at the URL qedcon.org. Well, Andy, I'm sorry I can't be there this year, but maybe I can put on my Christmas wish list a QED appearance in, I can't believe I'm saying this, 2024. Good grief.
Oh, it's running away. It's running away.
It certainly is. But for now, Andy Wilson, all the way there from lovely Liverpool, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Richard.
Richard, how do I get better at telling if people are lying?
It's really simple. What you need to do...
Ghost's real.
Well, actually, funny you should ask that, because what I've
How
discovered...
do I improve my memory?
I've got this great trick.
Can you make me happier?
Okay, look. For answers to 1,000 questions about the incredible world of human behaviour and the psychology of everyday life, join me, psychologist Richard Wiseman...
And me, science journalist Marnie Chesterton...
on Richard Wiseman's On Your Mind, a new podcast from Podimo and Telltale.
Can I win the lottery?
Probably not.
You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Canada, and I'm going to tell you about some people who recently visited here from 3 countries and continents. And I know these people because of my awesome connections to Susan Gerbic and Richard Saunders. First was Susan and Craig Shearer from Auckland, New Zealand. Craig you may know from the podcast Yeah Nah. Plus, he is the chair of the New Zealand Skeptics. Next was Faith and Romero Rodriguez from the Triangle Skeptics in Raleigh, USA, with whom I had the pleasure of staying with in their supposedly haunted home in 2022. And third, because good things happen in threes, Andras Pinter from, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce this correctly, and I apologize in advance, Andras, Székesfehérvár, Hungary. And he arrived guiding a group of 42, yes, 42 Hungarian tourists through most of the favorite tourist destinations in Canada. Andras is an active European skeptic as the chair of his local skeptic society, and he is the producer and co-host of the European Skeptics Podcast. 3 of these people I had never met before, and I am constantly amazed at how like-minded individuals can instantly enjoy each other's company. I hope you enjoy the rather spontaneous interviews of my guests. First, while stuck in traffic in downtown Calgary because a Nickelback concert finished at the same time that we were heading back to the Shearers Hotel, after a wonderful night at a pub followed by some twilight or blue hour photography. Secondly, with the Rodriguezes sitting on our deck, enjoying the sunshine after a real Canadian maple syrup pancake breakfast. And lastly, at a hotel in Canmore, an hour outside of Calgary, after a lovely dinner with Andras and his 42 tourists. Well, I'm in the car right now with Greg, Craig, Susan, and Vincent. And we've had quite the amazing day. We've toured all over Calgary and had a pub night, played a giant Connect 4, and Susan, and this is not Susan Gerbic, this is Susan Shearer, all the way from New Zealand. I forgot to even mention Craig Shearer from New Zealand because Susan did so well at that Connect 4. Did you play any other games, Susan?
I won both games I played.
Awesome. You are the Master Calgary Connect 4 winner. And we had a Skeptics in the Pub, a special Skeptics in the Pub, where about 10 people showed up. It was really great to welcome Craig Shearer and Susan Shearer all the way from New Zealand, which is pretty exciting. Why are you here?
Well, we're here on holiday, but yes, your co-conspirator Susan Gerbic, I happened to mention to her that we were coming this way, and she said, "Oh, you must meet up with these people in the US and Canada." So I met up with Shane from the Beehive Skeptics when we were in Salt Lake City, and that was a really, really fun experience. And he took us on a hike up a canyon, which was really cool. And met up with you guys tonight, which has been a great experience.
And we actually got to see Blue Hour overlooking the Calgary Tower and the Saddle Dome, and because you have a little hobby called photography, which is similar to what I like to do.
Yeah, definitely. And it is amazing. I mean, it started getting dark at about 10 o'clock tonight, and we just finished photographing in the Blue Hour at 11 o'clock at night. So yeah, it's the hours of summer are certainly very extended up here in Calgary.
At this time of year in particular, we just had our summer solstice, so the days are very long. And if you really wanted to do some more early morning photography, the sun comes up around 5. So if you want no sleep, you can do some more photography.
Exactly. Well, we'll sleep in the middle of the day when the light's not as good.
There you go.
I'm not sure whether Susan will approve of that, though.
But you've got a great trip planned, and it's through the Rocky Mountains, where I have heard you can find Sasquatch. However, quite often they dress up as bears. So just so you know.
Right, okay. Well, is bear spray effective on Sasquatch?
From what I understand, yes. And when you're in Banff, look out for, there is actually a big stuffed Sasquatch that you can take a picture of yourself with.
Oh, excellent.
And there's lots of Sasquatch memorabilia, so enjoy that.
Yes, I'm sure we will.
Sounds wonderful. And if you do spot any Sasquatch, let us know. Do you have any...
I'll have to hand in my card, my Skeptics card.
Do you have any Sasquatch-like creatures or folklore creatures that are common in New Zealand?
I guess not really, but we do have people who claim to have seen the moa bird, which has been extinct for around about 700 years, but there's people who claim that they're still actually existing in the deep reaches of the forests down in the South Island.
Well, there you go.
No, never seen one, never found one.
When you're in the Okanagan, another thing you need to watch out for at Lake Okanagan is the Ogopogo, which is the Loch Ness Monster's cousin, from my understanding.
Okay. And is it as sort of popular there as Loch Ness is?
Yes.
All the touristy promotion around the supposed monster?
Absolutely. You can buy t-shirts, you can buy miniatures. There's even a great big, at least the last time I was there, there's a great big statue of an Ogopogo in the sand. And no kind of, like I know in Australia they have drop bears, so you don't have anything like that. I learned about that going to Australia.
It is a running joke, and so yeah, I have been warned about them. So Susan is originally from Australia. Me being from New Zealand, I have been warned about watch out for the drop bears.
Have you ever seen one, Susan?
No.
I have a t-shirt, so they must be real. Well, thanks for talking with me in this brief car ride to your hotel from our spot.
Well, it's been a fantastic afternoon and evening with the Calgary Skeptics.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So I'm so excited because Faith and Romero are here all the way from the Triangle Skeptics area of Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to Real Canadian Maple Syrup, Canada.
Thank you for having us.
We've had Faith and Romero on the show before when Susan and I traveled to your place. I guess it was
2022.
2022. Oh, I'm glad you've got a brain.
13 months ago. You came at the beginning of May of 2022.
To your haunted house.
Yes. Not so haunted house.
In the bedroom I was staying at, it had something very ghostly written on inside the closet.
Yes, it said something to the effect of the new owners of this house, it is haunted, which isn't true. Because we haven't had any hauntings or any paranormal activity. There's been none.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you and I are wearing the Kenny, which is Melanie Tracek King's Thinking is Power t-shirts. And it says, I hope it's a ghost this time. So it's quite appropriate for your house.
Yes, we have actually heard some creaking up in the attic, but I don't know if that was because of the weather change or we may have had like a squirrel or something that got in.
Could be either one. And Ramiro, how are you enjoying your trip so far? You've had a bit of an adventure.
Yes, so I came over for a bicycle race or a triathlon, and unfortunately I crashed on the bike portion of the triathlon, and I think I broke my foot, and so I've been in crutches, and it has not been as enjoyable as we hope it would be, but we're trying to make the best of it, and we've had a wonderful time here in Canada.
You kind of landed on your head, from my understanding.
Yeah, I think my head broke most of the force. And so, we want to praise Rudy helmets because, the helmet cracked. There was road rash on the helmet, but my head was perfectly fine, but my foot was not. So I wish I had a little foot helmet when I crashed.
I have to ask, we have the Bigfoot Sasquatch that is supposedly lives in the mountains close to where I live. Do you have any kind of folklore monster that would be in North Carolina?
And we don't have one. We have more ghosts. Yeah, we have the gray man who is supposed to be seen on the beach if a hurricane is coming, and it means it will be a pretty severe one. And we have something called the Devil's Tramping Ground, which is just a circular patch of dirt where grass doesn't grow. And it's theorized that the devil goes around there and paces in a circle.
Oh, interesting. It's not a fairy ring.
It's not a fairy ring. There's no mushrooms or anything. It's just a patch of dirt that nothing grows in, and it's called the Devil's Tramping Ground because he'll go there and contemplate.
Interesting. No roundup involved?
As far as I know, no, but you're not allowed to access that place anymore since COVID. So I've never been there, unfortunately.
Interesting.
We also have a decommissioned battleship called the USS North Carolina, which some people think it's haunted because there was an explosion that damaged the ship. Mm-hmm. And I believe Kenny Biddle has done some investigations on it.
It's in Wilmington, so that we have a port down there, and that's where it's stationed. And they actually do Halloween tours. We might have to do one this time around, where they'll take you on what places may have been haunted and where people may have died.
Ooh, it sounds interesting. Thank you so much, Faith and Romero, and I hope you have a fantastic last bit of your tour, and I hope your leg starts feeling better and you can still enjoy your holiday.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was great staying here.
Awesome. Yes, and it was wonderful pancakes this morning with real Canadian maple syrup and homemade espresso cappuccinos. We got the real treatment. Thank you.
I just happen to be in Canmore right now, and look who I found.
Andras Pinter is my name.
Thank you for saying that for me because I was struggling. And he is from the ESP Podcast, or the European Skeptics Podcast. And he is here in Canada for a really cool reason. Tell me why you're here.
I'm here because I work as a traveling tour guide, accompanying groups all over the world, and it happens to be Canada this time.
Which is awesome. And I know Richard connected us, I think it was in the wintertime, or actually it was when you were in Australia for the conference, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I think that was the time when he just out of the blue, he just came up with, you should get connected to Adrienne. And all of a sudden, we were connected. It was really cool that this is how he works.
Exactly. It's great. Susan Gerbic's like that too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Making connections. So, and I've had the pleasure of many skeptics in the last week and a half. First, Craig Shearer and his wife Susan from New Zealand Skeptics. And then Faith and Romero Rodriguez from the Triangle Skeptics. And now from the European Skeptics. It's very exciting. And can you describe where you're going on your tour briefly? And also, we were talking earlier about some of the crazy stories you've heard from other tour guides, and I want you to tell me your favorite one.
You mean if it's not Canada related, I can think of something that is my absolute favorite. But first, let me cover the first part of your question. We started out, so basically this is a 14-day long tour to Canada, and we started in Montreal. Then went on to Quebec and Ottawa, Kingston, Toronto, Niagara Falls. And after covering that part of the country, we flew into Calgary from Toronto. And now we are about to start our Rockies tour, the Canadian Rockies. And that means that we are traveling to all kinds of beautiful, lovely places with a lot of natural history to explain that I love to do. And then we will end up in Kamloops and Vancouver and Victoria. So we're covering quite a bit of mileage. Yeah, there.
And you'll have to watch out for our cryptids, which are like Bigfoot or Sasquatch and the Lake Minnewanka monster.
Yes, we are actually very close to Lake Minnewanka because it's just about 10 to 12 kilometers from here. There is the supposed Lake Minnewanka monster that someone is said to have caught at some point, and it sits in the glass window in one of the stores in Banff. And when you started explaining it to me and you showed me the picture, I realized that I have seen it before. So I actually have seen the Lake Minnewanka monster, which is a big thing, apparently. But my most favorite is around Lake Minnewanka is mostly the crasher squirrel, which is not a cryptid, but it's a funny animal. It's a Colombian ground squirrel who made a funny appearance in one of the pictures a couple of years back, like 10, 15 years back.
Yeah, photobombed.
The photobomb, yeah. That's why it got the name crasher squirrel. So it crashed the photo, but it really got off. It's amazing.
And it has its own Wikipedia page. I was so surprised to find out.
It does, because lots of people are editing Wikipedia so that the proper information is there, and apparently there's a lot to find out about the crasher squirrel as well. So thanks for the community of editors on Wikipedia.
And you were talking about how you don't like when you find tour guides, because you're one of them, you are a tour guide, giving strange stories that you know are probably not true. And you said you have a favorite one. I haven't heard it yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, my favorite one is out of Italy, and down in southern Italy on the Amalfi Coast. There is a plethora of statues and streets named after a guy that is named Flavio Gioia. The problem with Flavio Gioia is that guy probably never existed, but everyone keeps claiming that the guy was born in their community, in their little town around the area, and they're very proud of that guy. But you can actually find out in literature how the story developed. So it started out by a historian named Flavio. And Flavio wrote that the people of Amalfi reinvented the compass. And then another historian reported, according to Flavio, the Amalfitans invented the compass. And then the next guy, and yet another historian, writes that completely wrong interpretation of the original story. It was Flavio who invented the compass. So the next thing you know, that it developed even a surname, because one of the historians was from a place called Gioia further down south in Italy. So Flavio Gioia, character of Flavio Gioia, was basically born that way. And you can actually follow the literature. And it's so funny how people still believe that there was a guy named Flavio Gioia who invented a compass.
That's fascinating. Never heard that story. So interesting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and thanks for meeting up with me in Canmore and suggesting this meeting. I think it's been exciting to meet you finally.
Yeah, likewise. And I really appreciate you driving out here from Calgary, and so good to finally meet you in person. Let's try this again.
That would be awesome. And Andras' first impression was very typical of meeting me. And he's like, she's tall. A lot taller than I thought.
Yeah, and we were laughing about that fact with Richard as well, that I had the same experience with Richard. I never knew that he was this tall. But I'm kind of a short guy. But yeah, it's fun to meet people in person.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much. I look forward to meeting up with you again in a few months, maybe.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks.
Well, that's all for now. But before I go, I wanted to give you an update on Susan and Craig Shearer's trip. Craig photographed Bigfoot, and unlike all previous photos of the cryptid, this Bigfoot photo was crystal clear. It turns out there is a recreational vehicle company in Canada and the United States that makes trailers, or caravans in Australian, and the company's name? Bigfoot RV. And the name is printed in large letters across the back of the caravan, and that's what Craig took the photo of. And I guess that means that Craig won't have to turn in his skeptics card after all. This is Adrienne Hill, signing off.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Jump into our paper taxi and head down the road to the Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia for digitised newspapers, gazettes, periodicals, lots of magazines. Actually, I rarely look into the magazine section. I should do that more. Normally it's newspapers. Digitised from Australian history. We've looked at so many things over the many months we've been doing Trove, but today we're going to look at something which may be the very last Trove of all, and the last show and the last of everything, because we're looking at the end of the world. Ah yes, the end of the world, an oldie but a goodie. Every year someone will predict that this year or next year or soon will be the end of the world. And this is nothing new. The world's been ending for a very long time. So let's look back through the archives to see references to the end. And let's start with a very short notice here in the Braidwood Review and District Advocate from New South Wales, dated the 19th of November, 1929. Prophesying the end of the world in 1932, a Muslim message has caused consternation in South Africa. That's all it says. A little bit vague. Well, as it happened, the world did not end in 1932. And now for a longer article, we turn to the Cairns Post from Queensland, dated the 23rd of August, 1941. End of the world. And this is interesting because it was published in the years of the Second World War. At the Hayden Planetarium, New York, are being shown the various ways in which the world may perish. Planets are like human beings. They are born, they reach maturity, and they die. The Earth is still young, only 2 or 3 billion years old, and it has been calculated that, insofar as the Sun is concerned, it has 15 billion more years ahead of it. But our planet might be destroyed by the approaching moon at some remote time. Sir George Darwin, Henry Poincare, and Harold Jeffreys mathematically developed the dread possibilities, writes Waldemar Kamfert, I think that's pronounced, in the New York Times Magazine. The moon was hurled off by the Earth. Ultimately, the moon will retrace its course. Already, there is a bulge on the moon, a bulge that goes back to the time when the moon was plastic. And plastic in that term, I think, means somewhat flexible. When the moon approaches within 2/5 of its present distance, the bulge will be subjected to tremendous pulling strains. Lunar mountains will collapse. On the Earth, cracks will open in which cities will be engulfed. The sky will be ablaze with meteorites, fragments of lunar mountains. All life will vanish. The moon will not actually crash into the Earth. It will be broken up into millions of meteorites, which will then circle around the Earth. Another likelihood is that the Earth will be reduced to absolute zero by the cooling of the sun. The sun is actually getting hotter. That cannot go on forever. Eventually, its energy will be exhausted. It will be reduced to a black cinder. Long before that happens, ice will cover the Earth, ice hundreds of miles thick. The atmosphere will rain down in showers of liquid air. Even if man could survive the cold, he would perish for lack of oxygen. Or the sun may blow up long before it cools. In other words, it may become a nova or a new star. Many such new stars have been discovered. The Star of Bethlehem was probably one. When the sun does blow up, the whole solar system will go with it. Or a comet may strike the Earth. As the comet rushes towards us, it will blaze like a flaming sword which covers the whole sky. It will burst into 1,000 fragments, which will rain down on the Earth. Oceans will boil. Life will be destroyed. And that reminds me of a wonderful book published some years ago by my friend Dr. Phil Plait, The Bad Astronomer. And that book, which is still available on Amazon, is called Death from the Skies, The Science Behind the End of the World. And now let's look in a newspaper called The Week from Brisbane, Queensland, dated the 20th of October, 1899. End of the world. Prognosticators of that period, known as Crack of Doom, have much to answer for. A girl whose parents live at Stockton Church in Oxfordshire, on one of the highest points of the Cheltenham Hills, was greatly perturbed by something she read emanating from one of those self-appointed prophets, which led her to believe that the world would end on Monday, August 28th. She was in a good situation in London, but was so impressed with the prophecy that she left her employment and, to the astonishment of her parents, speedily returned to her native village, preferring, as she said, to die in her own home. All the way back there in 1899, and it goes to remind us that over the decades and probably centuries indeed, people have been scared by these prophecies of the end of the world, and they will do all sorts of things and sell things and move, and it goes on. And now let's see what the leader from Melbourne, Victoria, has to say on the 13th of July, 1907. End of the world. From time immemorial, men have asked themselves whether it was possible that the world may come to a sudden and catastrophic end. It used to be thought that such an end would come, if at all, as the result of a collision with a comet. But closer astronomical study has shown that fear to be groundless. In his just published Astronomical Studies, Mr. Elliot Gore declares that the real danger to the world is to be feared from the existence of dark bodies in space. There is no actual evidence that such bodies exist, but most astronomers suspect that here and there are dead suns, devoid of light and radiant activity. And it is quite possible that, in its career through space, the sun might collide with such a body when its heat and light would be enormously increased. and the Earth would instantly be destroyed. We should, however, be warned of the approach of the cataclysm. When about 15,000 million miles from the Sun, the dark body would begin to shine by reflected light. It would look at first like a new and remote planet. In about 10 years, it would have become so bright as to be visible to the naked eye. In 14 years, it would be so bright as to attract general attention. I'm sure it would. In the 15th year, it would be brighter than any object except the moon, and its terrible approach would have created universal alarm. Very soon after would come the great catastrophe of its collision moving at 400 miles per second with the Sun moving at the same speed. In the last moment of its approach, there would be 2 moons in the sky. It is possible that this dead body might not be so large in, and the next word is just a blur, in something as the Sun. So we can only guess what that word might be. It's a short word. If it were only as large as Jupiter, there would be much shorter warning. The total time from the date when it became visible to the cataclysm would only be about 3 years. Mr. Gore asks, "Is there any star visible at the present time which might be identical with an approaching dark body?" His answer is that a scrutiny with a low-powered glass has shown none, but a detailed examination of the region towards which the solar world is moving is required before a definite opinion can be given. Now let me see, when was that again? 1907. Interesting speculations and thoughts and studies way back in 1907. Hello? What's this on the page? We have an ad for Ayres sarsaparilla. One of my favourite drinks from when I was younger, sarsaparilla. Almost immediately after taking Ayres sarsaparilla, you begin to feel its cleansing, strengthening, and purifying power. Really? If you feel that your depression is passing away, your brain clears up, things look brighter, sleep refreshing, the nerves act better, and new life and vigor begin to take possession of your whole system. Your digestion improves. You get more benefit from your food. Your appetite returns. Sounds too good to be true. Your friends begin to notice a marked change in your general appearance. The old colour comes back to the lips. It's interesting that the word colour is spelt the American way, so this seems to be lifted straight from an American advertisement, I think. The eyes look brighter. The step becomes more elastic, and every dose of Ayres sarsaparilla promotes the return of good health. Those who suffer from the debilitating effects of a warm climate, oh, that's me, will find in Ayres sarsaparilla just what they need to bring back the old force, vim, and energy. There are many imitation sarsaparillas. Be sure to get Ayres. Okay, maybe that was available in 1907 in Melbourne. And now let's go forward many decades to the 1950s. 1950, in fact, the year 1950, on the 12th of June in the Kalgoorlie Miner from Western Australia. The end of the world. Visiting clergyman's prediction. Melbourne, June 11. The present world would end within the next 50 years. The Reverend J. Sidlow Baxter said at the Collins Street Baptist Church tonight. Mr. Baxter, who was born in Sydney, is a pastor of Charlotte Chapel, Edinburgh, and is on a world tour. He gave 3 reasons for his view: the atomic bomb, the suppression of Christianity in Russia, and the revival of Israel as a state, as foretold in the Scriptures. Let's see, it would end within the next 50 years in 1950, so we're about 23 years over that time period. So far, so good. And now from the Morning Bulletin in Queensland, dated the 17th of December 1954. Awaits end of the world. East Lansing, Michigan, December the 15th. A prediction that the world will come to an end on December 21 became a matter of official business today before the governing body of the Michigan State College. Dr. John Hanna, president of the Michigan State College, reported to the state board that Dr. Charles Lawhead, a staff physician at the college hospital, had submitted his resignation because of his belief that the world would end on December 21. Dr. Hanna told the board that students had told him that Dr. Lawhead had been holding meetings at his home and teaching the benefits of some peculiar religious sect. Dr. Hanna said the group believed that the world would end on December 21 and that flying saucers from Venus or Mars, Dr. Hanna was not sure which, would rescue some of the survivors. We understand Dr. Lawhead is disposing of his possessions and is getting ready to move to some mountaintop to await the rescue, Dr. Hanna said. Now, would these people who await the end of the world, and when it doesn't come, are they disappointed or relieved, I wonder? Finally, let's go to the year 1899. We're really bouncing around the centuries here. The Yass Evening Tribune on the 23rd of February that year. The end of the world. Sir Robert Ball, the eminent astronomer, makes the startling prediction that the end of the world will be occasioned by the fall of the oceans into the centre of the earth. He has been delivering a series of lectures, and in one of them he discussed the horrible possibilities of the catastrophe referred to. He said that it was entirely possible that by a gigantic crack in the bottom of the sea, the entire volume of the ocean would be precipitated into the centre of the earth. He declared that the eruption that follow, it says, would instantly destroy all life. Sir Robert has also expressed the belief that back in the past ages, when the earth was moving at terrific speed, part of it flew off, and thus was the moon created. Wonderful thoughts and possibilities when you think about it. In 1899, science at work, putting forward ideas, investigating. Ah, yes, the end of the world. And believe me, there are many, many, many more references over the years to the time the world ceased to be. We might revisit that in the future if the world is still here. But luckily for us, the end of Trove was threatened but didn't eventuate. And it's still there for you to investigate at trove.nla.gov.au, because when you go there, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. I'm safe and sound back in the Skeptic Zone studio now with... That was Hen. Henrietta the cat just sneezed at my feet. Yes? Henny, would you like to say something to the Skeptic Zone fans? Well, if looks could kill. Do you want some dinner? Would you like some dinner? Breakfast? Fish? Don't work with children or animals. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv via your monthly or weekly Patreon or PayPal payments. Yes? She's rolling on her back. I'll give you a blow-by-blow. Oh, and she's run out the door. By your payments, it really helps keep the show going. Next week on the Skeptic Zone, we have, in the Trove segment, a look at phrenology. Reading the bumps on your head, or my head, or Henrietta's head, she must have some interesting bumps. Now, before long, I'll be making my way back to North America, and I'm pleased to say that I'll be giving a couple of talks at least while I'm there, one in Berkeley, at the Berkeley Library, and one up in Oregon, Bend, Oregon, but that won't be until later in August. It's a workshop, the Skeptical Box of Tricks. I'll be teaching spoon bending. What was that? cat's running up and down the stairs. I'll be teaching spoon bending, water divining, well, how it really works, the tricks behind the Power Balance wristband. We'll be testing out the premium wine card, and I'll be teaching some origami. The Skeptical box of tricks, if you're in the Berkeley area or you're in Oregon, keep an eye out on your local skeptical information, but I'll be certainly giving details here on the Skeptic Zone closer to the date. But for this week, signing off from Sydney, Australia with Henrietta the cat running around, this is Richard Saunders. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.